This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's pretty bright out there. Gonna be pretty hot today. Oh, I hate the heat. I can deal with the cold. It's the heat I can't do much about. Especially, as I mentioned last night in my ambush stream, the way that this particular apartment building is configured with its insulation or lack thereof. I'm not quite sure. But either way, good morning, everyone. Hope you got better sleep than I did. I slept okay, but could have been better. But them's the breaks in the summertime. But before I get into today's subject matter, which I think is pretty obvious, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Noah Sencio, good morning. Mike R., good morning. Kiever Denmother, good morning. And thank you, Kiever Dam, as always, for providing the links to the fundraisers for our friends Moonshock, Natalie, Angela Ariaga, Ashley, and Rhonda. You guys can take a look at those when you have the opportunity. If you can donate, please do so. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, share those out on social media. That would be appreciated as well. Thank you, Kiever Dam, again. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Dr. Functional, good morning. You're a ridiculous lunatic. Good morning to you. Who else is here? Mike Savage, Blarg, Frank Hubbard the Fourth. Good morning. Kiro Soldier, good morning. The Blakester, good morning. Johnny Hellcat, good morning to you. Ercole Di Stefano, good morning. Shadowclaw, good morning to you. And good morning to anybody else that I missed. I don't think I missed anybody, but anybody lurking, anybody in the future, good morning. And as I see people pop in, I will say good morning to you too. So yes, today, as I say that, Advocast Diaboli, good morning. And Woodcutter, good morning to you. So as I mentioned, I think last night or elsewise, it's been a little while since I've done a Border News Digest. The political landscape has been filled with questions about the competence and cognition of the president, as it should have been 4 some odd years ago, but all of a sudden everybody's discovering what anybody with any eyeballs and ears could have told you over the last several years. Oh my gosh, the president might be a little bit off kilter, if you can believe it. Well, even though it was brought up briefly and somewhat garbled at the debate, news of the border has not really been at the forefront recently, at least not from my attention. So, in order to bring myself back up to speed, and perhaps you as well, let's take a look at a few stories that have popped up over the last several days regarding the U.S.-Mexico border. I'm sure everything's going fine. At least that's what CBS is telling me right here. Illegal crossings at U.S.-Mexico border fall to 3-year low, the lowest level under Biden. Wow. I mean, that sounds great. Let's find out more. Illegal crossings along the U.S. southern border fell to a 3-year low in June, following President Biden's drastic move to curtail asylum and continued efforts by Mexico to stop migrants heading north, according to preliminary custom and border protection data obtained by CBS News. Border Patrol processed approximately 84,000 migrants who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border without authorization in June, the lowest monthly level since Mr. Biden took office in January 2021, when the agency reported just over 75,000 migrant apprehensions, the internal statistics show. June's migrant apprehension tally was also the 4th consecutive monthly drop, continuing an unexpected downward trend in illegal border crossings that started in the early spring. Apprehension tally. Well, that doesn't mean that fewer people actually crossed the border. That just means we caught fewer. I feel like I'm being manipulated here a little bit. Border Patrol agents recorded 118,000 migrant apprehensions in May, 129,000 in April, 137,000 in March, and 141,000 in February, according to public government figures. Okay, so 118,000 migrants in May, April, March, Okay, so a decline in apprehensions. Okay. Migrant crossings dropped across border regions, including in remote and rugged stretches of Arizona and California that had become the busiest sectors for illegal entries. How do you know that? Are we monitoring every route in and making counts? The marked reduction in migration comes weeks after Mr. Biden invoked a presidential power frequently cited by the Trump administration to ban most migrants from asylum if they crossed into the U.S. between official border crossings known as ports of entry. Well, up to a particular limit, at least. The asylum crackdown, which includes exemptions for unaccompanied children and those who wait in Mexico for a chance to be processed at a port of entry, has allowed U.S. immigration officials to more quickly deport larger numbers of migrants, mainly those from Mexico and other countries in Latin America. The sustained decrease in unauthorized border entries has also occurred against the backdrop of a months-long campaign by Mexican officials to slow U.S.-bound migration by carrying out more deportations to southern Mexico and preventing migrants from boarding trains and buses. The aggressive operation began after a meeting between top American and Mexican officials in December, when migrant apprehensions at the U.S. border reached 250,000, a record. Yeah. And I talked about that back then, and the circumstances seemed a little odd. There was one example of a frequent area in California that was used as border crossing material that was very, very busy. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of stopped because Mexican enforcement on their side just suddenly shot through the roof after this meeting, the details of which were not released to the public. And so I started wondering, gosh, Mexico wasn't doing this before. All of a sudden, they're going to the most, busy locations. The details of the meeting were not released. I was wondering at that time, was some kind of deal made? Hey, you guys step up your side of the deal until after the election, etc. I don't know. It just seemed convenient. Thank you, Lee Anthony Davis. Hello, Scribelight, and to everyone in the chat. And a big thank you for putting my YouTube link on your channel. I'm truly grateful and thank you. Well, you're welcome, Lee. Always happy to help out a fellow YouTuber trying to get their toes in the proverbial water for whatever little help that I can provide. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And hope you're having a good Sunday. Beyond U.S. and Mexican policies, other factors also influence migrant migration, including weather patterns and tactics by smugglers who control the movement of migrants in many parts of Mexico. Temperatures along the U.S. border, for example, have increased rapidly and are expected to continue climbing further into the summer. Yeah, if you can believe it, it gets hot in the summer. Senior U.S. officials told CBS News the partial asylum ban is the main driving force behind the steep decline in crossings. Well, yes, I can't believe it. If you disincentivize people from coming across the border thinking they're going to get a free ride or they're going to be able to stay here for years and years and years while their asylum claim is processed, if you actually say, hey, in order to qualify for an asylum claim, you have to enter the country legally through a port of entry. If you actually had that as a rule, you'd see migration drop precipitously quickly. We don't apparently have that law yet. It seems like a simple law to pass, but sometimes simple is complicated when it comes to our politics or those trying to increase their numbers in state populations for the sake of political gain and votes and things, but that's a whole other conversation. One official noted the drop has been more acute since the crackdown was announced on June 4th. In the past week, the average of daily migrant apprehensions fell below 2,000, or nearly half of May's 3,800 average, internal CPB data show. That number is also close to the 1,500 threshold the Biden administration set to suspend the asylum restrictions. Yeah, so we'll allow 1,500 people in under the bad rules, but that's our limit. That's our daily limit, 1,500 people. Anyway, quote, the numbers have been going down before the presidential announcement, but they went down a lot more afterwards, so I think you have to give some credit to that, unquote, said Andrew Seeley, president of the Migration Policy Institute, a Washington-based nonpartisan think tank. So what you're saying is Trump's policies work. This is, for all the things going into the election that are a detriment to Biden's campaign and argument of virtue and value and everything else, the fact that he has had to fall back to effectively Trump-era policies on the border after calling Trump's policies on the border hateful and xenophobic and racist and extreme and et cetera, well, then if Trump was doing it better during his tenure, why do we reelect you? It's not helping anything. Quote, we have to assume, if nothing else, that in the short term it has dissuaded some people, unquote. Yeah, if only we could pass a law that says entering this country illegally disqualifies you from making a claim of asylum. If only. Under the sweeping policy change, yes, U.S. officials have been returning and deporting thousands of migrants to Mexico or their home countries on a weekly basis without screening them for asylum. Only those who affirmatively say they fear being harmed if deported are being screened. Well, then everyone coming across the border is going to say, I fear being harmed if I'm deported. But even then, those migrants are being interviewed using heightened screening standards for lesser known protections that, unlike asylum, do not provide permanent legal refuge. Well, that's good at least. Asylum processing at ports of entry has continued under Mr. Biden's proclamation. U.S. border officials have continued to process and admit roughly 1,500 migrants each day at these legal entry points using a smartphone app known as CBP-1 to coordinate their arrivals, which has had problems from the get-go, but that's a whole other story. These stricter asylum rules have led to a 60% decrease in migrant releases, which U.S. officials have historically viewed as a pull factor that attracts migration, officials said. Migrants who are released are generally able to live and work in the U.S. for years, regardless of whether their asylum claims ultimately prevail, because of how backlogged the immigration courts are. Yes. So, again, let's make it illegal to apply for asylum if you enter the country illegally. If we could. Still, U.S. officials concede Mr. Biden's proclamation is not a silver bullet. The move, for example, has had a more limited impact on migrants from far-flung countries in the Eastern Hemisphere, such as China and parts of Africa, where the U.S. does not carry out regular deportations. Migrants from these countries are still banned from asylum under Biden's executive action, but some of them are still being released into the U.S. because they cannot be sent back home or Mexico due to diplomatic or operation constraints. Yeah, I think the one country we have the biggest issue with, or at least the one that's been cited the most, has been Venezuela, because we don't have a deportation, or I should say a extradition agreement with Venezuela. So if you come here from Venezuela, we really can't do anything with you. That's what was happening in New York. Venezuelans specifically were being given special treatment or special options because New York couldn't do anything with them otherwise, or the U.S. as far as I understand it. Mr. Biden's asylum order is also in legal peril. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against the policy in federal court, arguing it violates U.S. asylum law and increases the chances of American officials sending migrants back to places where they can be harmed. At the request of the ACLU, federal courts blocked a similar Trump-era asylum ban. Well, I mean, any place you're sent back to is somewhere you could be harmed. But yeah, that's why you have to make a legitimate asylum claim. If you're coming from a place where you're actually under threat, you go to a port of entry and say, I'm being persecuted on a religious basis, on a political basis, my family's in danger, the gangs are after me, here's the evidence, et cetera, and then you start going through the process. And if you have a legitimate claim, we have laws for that. But it has to be legitimate. If you come across the border illegally, that should be denied you. So encourage people to follow the rules. That's what I say. Faustonia, thank you so much for the happy, dancy, kabuki, dancing. I think I said dancing twice. Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
Ooh, a spooky Shadow Claw Dogcat Fox. Thank you so much, Faustonia. Appreciate it. Let's see. And then, then I skipped. Sorry about that. Killer Turnus. Thank you so much. Hey there, I'm 4 days away from moving to North Carolina. Well, how far of a trip is it? And I've thankfully only had to move house a couple of times in my life, and it's a stressful situation. I hope the process is manageable. And you're going to North Carolina because you want to? Yes. I'm not saying anything about North Carolina, just like it's a move that you're looking forward to, I hope. I hope. Let's see. Do big change is scary. Yes, it can be. It can be. Moving. Oh, you see, you're migrating for economic reasons. Yeah, and especially in this economy, I can believe it. Well, best of luck, Killer Turnus. I hope it goes as smoothly as it can, and hope everything settles in quickly, because I know that can be very disruptive, obviously. And thank you again. Let's see. While it's unclear whether it will continue in the coming months, the migration lull is a political reprieve for Mr. Biden. I think Mr. Biden has other issues right now. Ahead of his presidential contest in November with former President Donald Trump, who has again made a immigration. Let's try that again. Who has again made immigration a pillar to his White House bid. And he's completely justified in doing so, if you hadn't noticed, because Biden has had to retreat back to his policies to address a problem under his administration. Immigration ranks among the worst polling issues for Mr. Biden, whose administration has faced an unprecedented influx of migrant crossings along the southern border. I can't imagine why. And despite the steady drop in illegal border crossings, steady drops from all-time historic highs don't really improve things. It's like all that shows is that everything you were doing before was absolutely ineffective. And having to implement policies that you decried as practically evil when you were campaigning back in 2020 are your only respite. That's not trying to turn a pig's ear into a silk purse or whatever. It just doesn't quite work. And despite the steady drop in illegal border crossings, Trump has intensified his attacks on Mr. Biden's immigration record. And he's completely justified in doing so. These aren't improvement. We're trying to get back to a level before Biden came into office. Him clawing the numbers back down closer to where they were before he was president is not a mark in his favor. You're trying to spin that as though it is. It's not. In last week's debate, Trump cited heinous crimes allegedly committed by migrants living in the country illegally. Allegedly? There have been several, and they're not alleged. But anyway, faulting Mr. Biden for their release into the U.S. During the campaign, Trump has promised to oversee the largest deportation operation in U.S. history and end birthright citizenship for the children of unauthorized immigrants if elected. Well, Trump can say a lot. He's not necessarily going to be able to accomplish much of that without the consent of Congress. And Congress, as we have seen past his prologue, unless somehow the Republicans take over the House and the Senate this year, is it next year? I forget. I honestly forget. Is it this year that the Senate and House seats are also up for debate, or is that the midterms? I don't know. This is me trying to be awake on a Sunday morning. Either way, unless he gets control of all branches or houses of the Congress, he's not going to be able to do any of that. Trying to do a nationwide deportation campaign. This is what they were talking about back in 2016. I've got a copy somewhere of the Fusion. Remember Fusion? Before they became Splinter, before they went out of business? Fusion did an election night panel for 2016's election. And there were people on that panel who looked like someone had just told them their dog died. Because with Trump winning in the various states, they were all, soon the deportation forces will come door to door, house to house. I mean, you would have thought the world was ending. He wasn't able to do it back then. He's not going to be able to do it now. It makes no sense. There's no logistical way to do it. All he can do is work to disincentivize people coming here illegally, which, he was effectively doing and then was helped out by pandemic era rules. Shore up border walls and barriers and things, which he may or may not be able to do again. Again, it all depends if he can get the funding. If Trump wins again, there's going to be every move in the book to stymie anything he wants to do, even if Biden's decisions now regarding the border demonstrate the need for such actions. It's not going to matter because it's Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a dictator who's going to be blocked by democratic processes. But anyway, so yeah, that's good news, everybody. Good news. The apprehensions are at a 3-year low, the lowest level ever. So good news, everyone. Unless you then, of course, read the New York Post, who say something completely different. Illegal border crossings are still on the rise at the northern border. Oh, wait, northern border. Wait a second. Did I pick the wrong article here? The northern border. Oh, is this Canada? Wait a second. Maybe I got confused. Uh-oh. Now they're coming in at the north? What's going on? Illegal border crossings at the northern border continue to break records according to the latest data released by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In May, 18,644 foreign nationals were apprehended illegally entering the U.S. at the northern border, the highest total for the month of May in recorded history. Oh, well, so they're going down at the southern border. They're going up at the northern border. Uh-oh. The northern border has seen the highest number of illegal entries in the U.S. in U.S. history under the Biden administration, the Center Square has reported. In the first 8 months of fiscal 2024, more than 99,000 were apprehended after illegally entering through the northern border, according to CBP data. If the current trajectory continues, the numbers are on track to surpass fiscal 2023 apprehensions of 147,666. Those numbers are up from 92,737 apprehensions in fiscal 2022 and 24,895 in fiscal 2021. CBP's fiscal year begins October 1st. The data excluded gotaways, the official term used by CBP to describe foreign nationals who illegally enter the U.S. between ports of entry and don't return to Mexico or Canada. CBP does not publicly report this data. The Center Square first began obtaining it from a Border Patrol agent on condition of anonymity to provide a more accurate picture of monthly apprehension data. This sounds so sketchy. CBP does not report this data. Okay. The busiest sector at the northern border is the Swanton sector, which includes all of Vermont, 6 upstate New York counties, and 3 New Hampshire counties. The sector spans 295 miles of international boundary with the Canadian provinces of Quebec and Ontario, and is the first international land boundary east of the Great Lakes. In fiscal 2023, Swanton sector Border Patrol agents broke previous records by apprehending the greatest number of illegal border crossers in history of more than 6,700 foreign nationals from 76 countries, the Center Square exclusively reported. They continue to break records. So if you can believe it, it's not just Canadians. It's people from 76 different countries using the northern border to enter the U.S. illegally. And the numbers are not going down. Well, golly gee whiz. Quote, in less than 9 months, Swanton sector Border Patrol agents have apprehended more than 10,000 subjects from 83 countries, Chief Border Patrol Agent Robert Garcia said. The total so far this fiscal year, as of June 10th, was more than the sector's entire record-setting fiscal 2023 year, he said. Quote, we continue to see an unprecedented increase of illegal entries across eastern New York and Vermont, unquote. So while everything's being tightened up and attention is being paid to the southern border, the northern border is the new destination, huh? Good gravy. This is after northern border apprehensions reached their highest level in U.S. history in the first 6 months of fiscal 2024, with Swanton sector agents apprehending in 1 week more than they did in fiscal 2021. Think about that for a second, shall we? More in a week than in an entire previous year. Border Patrol agents at the northern border are also apprehending the greatest number of known or suspected terrorists, according to CBP data. In the first 6 months of fiscal 2024, they apprehended 143 KSTs, or known or suspected terrorists, the Center Square reported, including an Iranian with terrorist ties. I understand why the New York Post keeps saying the northern border and just saying the border, because everybody, just, and myself included, when I think of the border, I just think of the southern border, U.S.-Mexico border. We don't hear much about our northern border, do we? Well, here we go. That number is now up to 199. Again, 199 known or suspected terrorists, according to CBP data as of June 20th. By comparison, 117 KSTs were apprehended at the southwest border over the same period. The U.S.-Canada border is the longest international border in the world of 5,525 miles. Unlike the U.S.-Mexico border, there are no border walls or similar barriers separating the U.S. from Canada, and most of the northern border is unmanned and unpatrolled. Well, we might have to start thinking about changing that now, won't we? Numerous reports indicate that lack of operational control at the northern border poses a serious national security threat. You don't say. Quote, the northern border is under-resourced by far compared to the southwest border, unquote, former Border Patrol Chief Mark Morgan told the Center Square. Quote, but at the same time, it still represents significant threats. Cartels are expanding their operations, flying people into Canada, which doesn't require a visa, presenting an opportunity for terrorist watch-listed individuals to exploit. It's much easier to get to Canada to come across, unquote. The Swanton sector is currently hiring, Garcia says, offering up to $30,000 in incentives for new recruits, up from $20,000 hiring incentives offered in February. Garcia also emphasizes how the local community plays a vital role supporting Border Patrol efforts. Quote, agents rely on the vigilance of our community, he said. Swanton sector received more than 1,000 suspicious activity reports in 2023, and we are grateful for every call. We cannot effectively do our job without assistance from the public, unquote. As record numbers continue to pour through the northern border, he's appealing to the public saying, quote, we need your help now more than ever. Your call matters. 800-689-3362. Okay, well, I think we see where the next border crisis is already occurring, and we don't hear about this one, do we? Admittedly, I can't say that I've paid all that much attention, because when I think of the northern border, I just think of, Canadians trying to get across into, Washington or Idaho or something for a night of booze, if at all. But, okay, so now the question is, and I'll be specifically looking for this kind of stuff in the near future, what discussions is our country having with Canada in order to shore up, which admittedly would be an absolute nightmare, a 5,000-mile-long border, or at least in changing policies to disincentivize people sending people to Canada to cross over into this country. It just doesn't get much better, does it? No, it really doesn't. Anyway, now on to our next story. But I'll go over to the chat real quick and see what you guys are saying. You're ridiculous lunatic. Is that why our military bases have been on alert all weekend? I don't know. Could be. Oh, man. And then Shadowclaw, Scribelight. I mean, Trudeau won't do anything. He gave money to a terrorist and released him from custody. Yeah, I don't have, at least ostensibly, a whole lot of faith in the government of Canada to do much of anything if we ask them to. I don't know what leverage we would have. And of course, I would love to know if we're having any conversations with Canada about our shared border and security thereof. Because if the chief up in Swanton sector is begging the public for help and increasing, hiring incentives, is the U.S. government or the Canadian government really pulling their weight? I guess we'll just find out when we find out, and it'll probably be at the hands of a disaster. But I'm sure it'll be fine. Now, let's move on to the Arizona-Mexico border. Residents are fed up. Quote, the politicians are creating the mayhem, unquote. People of various political backgrounds in the U.S. state say they are increasingly feeling like pawns in a political game. Well, you are. A few hundred feet from the U.S.-Mexico border in Nogales, Arizona, Laura Aldana chuckled at the suggestion made by both leading presidential candidates that the region had fallen into chaos. Where? She asked rhetorically. She gestured towards the street outside the downtown formal wear boutique where she works. Quote, there's almost too little to do here, unquote. Elsewhere in town, Oscar Felix Jr., a local radio host, shook his head at the idea there was a crisis. Quote, "Yeah, no, we are good," unquote. And 100 miles east in the border town of Douglas, Perry Christensen, a pastor at the First Presbyterian Church, cringed. Quote, "I look at those conversations on TV or in the news, and it just makes me mad," she said. "The politicians are creating the mayhem," unquote. Really? It's all just a myth? Okay. In Arizona, a key battleground state, residents living near the border are finding their region the center of attention in a presidential election cycle where immigration has emerged as a top concern for voters. As it should. The issue has darkened Joe Biden's hopes for re-election. Well, no, it's really the sun going down that has darkened Joe Biden's hopes for re-election. But anyway, and the president, sensing this weakness, has promised to, quote, "secure the border and secure it now," unquote, with harsh new restrictions on people seeking asylum in the U.S. During the presidential debate last week, the Donald Trump, well, I guess he is the only one that we care about, the Donald Trump, honed in, that should be hyphenated, on the issue, redirecting questions about the economy, abortion, and the environment to immigration and painting a cataclysmic sense of millions arriving at the border to, quote, "destroy our country," unquote. If he wins in November, the former president has promised the detention and mass deportation of unauthorized immigrants and an expanded border wall. So is the Guardian saying this is all nonsense? The record number of crossings, both at the southern and now, of course, the northern border, are just not actually happening? Is this crisis denial again? Here along the border, residents interviewed by The Guardian had many different ideas about how the U.S. should respond to one of the largest surges in migration in the country's history. Okay, so you do admit it's happening, but you play it down like it's not that big of a deal with the quotes from the previous people. What? But even those with wildly different political views and background, perhaps plural there, anyway, were united in their skepticism that all that rhetoric would amount to much. Well, okay, if that's where we're going with this, I can understand, I can sympathize. Because even if Trump wants to do the things he wants to do, every Democrat on the planet will oppose him, even if it's a good idea. Even if Biden has effectively admitted that they are good ideas or necessary moves to make because he's Trump. So, yes, political gridlock will probably mean not much will actually get done, despite statements from either side. It's true. Some said they were increasingly feeling like pawns in a political game. Many were worried that the election year would further defer the sorts of broad reforms they've been requesting for years. They will. It just will, because anyone but Trump. Right? And if Biden gets into office, he will slow walk any real moves on the border because he'll have nothing to lose politically at that point because it'll be his second term and that'll be it. So, yeah. Quote, "It is interesting because every time it's a political campaign, the migrants become a problem," unquote, said Felix Jr., who runs the local Spanish language radio station Maxima FM. Quote, "But they never talk about what is really affecting us." Okay. All right. Well, tell us. At the beginning of the year, the border's Tucson sector, which stretches from Arizona's border with New Mexico in the east to the edge of Yuma County in the west, became the busiest region for migrant crossings. Across the border, authorities were apprehending a record number of people, including about 2.4 million people in the fiscal year ending in September 2023. 2.4 million people. That's only those that they know they apprehended. How many got through elsewise? Panicked local leaders have been publicly calling for more funding and resources from the federal government to shelter and feed the influx of people. In high-profile news reports, disgruntled ranchers and hardened immigration critics have recoiled at what they perceive as intruders on their land. It's not some kind of skewed perception. They are intruders. They're not supposed to be here. They have crossed illegally or have come in unwanted. Quote, "I'm afraid of how the media has covered this and how politicians have exploited that," unquote, said Mark Adams, a coordinator for Frontera de Cristo, a Presbyterian ministry based in Douglas and across the border in Agua Prieta. He and other locals have bristled at characterizations of Douglas and other border towns as chaotic or overrun. Well, I'll tell you what, maybe Douglas and other border towns aren't as bad as, say, El Paso or Eagles Pass or New York or Chicago. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. In September of last year, amid a rush of arrivals, Customs and Border Protection started releasing asylum seekers who had been granted humanitarian parole into small rural communities, including Douglas, Bisbee, Nogales, and Casa Grande, rather than transporting them to bigger cities. Many of the mayors and sheriffs of these towns balked. I can't imagine why. Thank you again, Faustonia. It seems cynical that the Biden administration is tightening borders for the election. So what, if reelected, that the measures will be loosened again post-election? That is infuriating. More likely than not, if Biden is reelected, the moves he's making on the border now will, yes, fall by the wayside. Not become much of a issue unless or until something major happens. It's going to require an absolute catastrophe that can be drawn straight back to the border before something will be done. Okay. So yeah, the only thing that's going to be done on the border is if Trump gets into office and the Republicans have control of both the House and the Senate. At that point, something likely will be done about the border. But it will be opposed to the nth degree by Democrats simply on the basis of, well, it's Trump, it's xenophobic, it's extreme, it's racist, whatever. And if Biden gets into office, yeah, focus will shift away from the border again. And Republicans will scream about it. And if Republicans and if Democrats are in control of the House and the Senate, well, as far as the border is concerned, nothing will happen. I mean, you might see some, I don't know, some sort of like performative type things taking place, like increasing, I mean, especially at the northern border and the southern border, increasing hiring benefits or hiring bonuses or something. Yeah, it really is going to take something major, unfortunately. Something major that can be drawn straight back to lax border policies. There's just too much political hay to be made over the border right now on both sides. But Biden's got other problems. I don't want to talk too much about election predictions because we could be here forever. But yeah, so you basically have it right, Faustonia. Basically have it right. It's just going to go back to center again if Biden gets reelected. It's not going to matter all that much. And yeah, it's really going to require Trump becoming president and having enough political control long enough to get something passed. And even then, it'll be a Band-Aid because the complexities of trying to secure either border, southern border or northern border, probably far exceed the powers of man to do so. Southern border, as they said, is a little easier because it's not as long, and there's some natural barriers that kind of help out. Northern border, it's a sieve. Walk right through. But anyway, let's see. Scrolling. But in Douglas, a town of about 15,500 people, locals sprang into action, Adams said. The local Catholic and Presbyterian churches, along with Frontera de Cristo, arranged housing for families and individuals. Local restaurants donated catered meals, and home cooks contributed giant pots of pozole? I don't know how to say that. Well, that's great. That's great. How long can that be sustained? How much more people can be taken on where that's sustainable? I mean, charity only goes as long as people can afford it. Over a 6-month period, the coalition welcomed about 8,500 people. Okay, so about half of the pre-existing population. All right. The volunteer-run Migrant Welcome Center ran so smoothly. Quote, hardly anybody who wasn't involved knew that this was even happening, unquote, Adams said. Well, okay, you're able to keep a lid on it. All right, well, let's double up your population again in the next 6 months. What happens then? Oh, and then again, and then once more, a year after that. What happens then? In recent months, as the number of migrants' apprehensions dropped, officials once again began busing new arrivals directly to Tucson, where they could more easily seek out legal resources and flights to reunite sponsors or family members in other states. But some in his congregation, were almost disappointed they wouldn't get to welcome more people, Adams said. Quote, I told them no, it's so much better for them to go to Tucson, he said, laughing. Quote, but this is a small community and there was just such an outpouring of support. So to see this narrative that the migrants are a burden to our towns is really upsetting, unquote. Ask Chicago. Ask New York. Ask El Paso. Ask Eagle Pass. Oh, this one town isn't having that part of a problem, guys. Everything's fine. This one town, this is the exception that doesn't prove the rule. Within the town and all along its outskirts were remote cattle ranches and scattered homesteads blend into desert and red rock mountains. Other residents said the national rhetoric on immigration and the border often clashed with their realities. Oh, well, if their realities are clashed, then I guess it just isn't happening other places. It's fine. It's fine, everybody. There's no problem. There's no problem. I'm currently not suffering from leukemia, everybody. So really, my dad is just, he's just overblowing it. This is hyperbole. Come on. Trump's references, especially to the border as a war zone, make her wince, said Christensen, the pastor. Quote, but I'm really disappointed that Biden and his people are just starting to do the same thing, she said. Quote, it's like people are just starting to sprout this rhetoric that isn't based on reality, unquote. Christensen, who grew up on a cattle ranch about 30 minutes drive out of town and still lives in the country, often sees migrants crossing through her property. Oh, okay. As do family members and neighbors. She can empathize with the complicated feelings some locals have about the surge in migration. Oh, she can? Many have to contend with trash on their property, cut cattle fences, drained water tanks, and other property damage that can cost ranchers earning slim margins of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, okay, but, it's not really a problem. And if you multiplied that by, I don't know, 2 or 3 times magnitude the number of people that originally lived in your town, I'm sure it wouldn't get any worse. Some worry about the threat posed by cartels who smuggle people across the border, she said, or drugs or just, criminals elsewise. What do you say to that? But, she added, quote, in my family, if someone crosses the fence or some smuggler drops them off in the desert, if they need help, we give them water and shade and a place to charge their phones. And then we mind our own business, unquote. Hey, you know what? I hate to tell you this. Our national security is your business. Our sovereignty is your business. I mean, as a citizen of the United States, I would hope you'd be concerned about these things and wouldn't be enabling victims of crime and thus encouraging the criminals to continue. Okay. Sorry, enabling victims of crime came out bad. I didn't mean it like that. I meant enabling criminals, those who would victimize people, right? Because if you're giving safe haven to people that criminals are smuggling across the border, and like, okay, I can just drop this person off here in the middle of nowhere, well, that just incentivizes them to keep doing it, doesn't it? Anyway. Recently, she had offered a drink to a young woman who was desperate and dehydrated when officers showed up at her door asking after a person of his description. I don't lie, so I had to tell them, she said. But this was just a young man and he was desperate. I hugged him and I said I was sorry. So wait. Okay, law enforcement showed up at your door looking for a person described as the person you were sheltering. He was just a young man and he was desperate. Yeah, desperate for what reason? To get away from authorities? Okay, look, I understand that there is a line of humanity that is oftentimes hard to cross. If you see someone who is drowning, you throw them a life preserver. Even if you find out later that that person is a terrible person, there's a reflex there to help. And in this specific case, in this anecdotal case, or any other cases of, just patent, good charity and being a human being, fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about your anecdotal story. We're not talking about, oh, well, I don't see it happening around me, so it's not really happening. People are just blowing it out of proportion. There's a larger problem here. The world is bigger than your Presbyterian congregation. I hate to tell you this. West of Nogales, where the border wall slices across the ancestral land of the Tohono O'odham, Faith Ramon sees a monument to an immigration system that has failed both her community and the migrants it was built to deter. Quote, I keep thinking, why does it have to be like this, unquote, she said. Construction of the wall during the Trump administration destroyed sacred Tohono O'odham sites and desecrated burial grounds, wreaking ecological disaster in its path. In the ensuing years, she said, enhanced border security measures in the region have led to the near daily harassment of Tohono O'odham Nation members. How so? Anyone who doesn't look white is at risk of getting pulled over or interrogated, said Ramon, a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation and a community organizer with the progressive group Lucha, which is challenging an Arizona ballot measure that would empower local law enforcement agents to similarly target and question anyone they suspected to be undocumented. I hate to tell you this, that is the reality of the situation at the southern border. That's just the reality. When you have millions of people from southern countries pouring into the United States illegally, I'm sorry to say that is unfortunately part of the investigatory process. And if you're being interrogated, if you have your papers, if you're here legally, if you're a citizen, then it is an inconvenience. But unfortunately, it is one that you're going to have to put up with. It's sort of like living in an earthquake zone or a hurricane zone. Occasionally, your life and your convenience are going to be interrupted by the realities of the situation on the ground. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. It may seem unfair, but it is necessary. This is what our immigration policies and the lackadaisical nature of the people in charge have brought us to. You want to levy a complaint? Well, then you should levy for more increased border security. Last year, Border Patrol agents shot and killed 58-year-old Raymond Mattia outside his home in the Tohono O'odham Reservation. Quote, if they want to secure the border, then they should be doing that, unquote, she said, not hanging around my grandma's backyard or my community store, unquote. Wait, what? If they want to secure the border, then they should be, securing the border, not shooting guys outside their home. I don't understand. Why did they shoot him? Was it accidental? What happened? Wait, why would you bring up that story and not tell us the details? Do I have to read a different story to find? I'm looking off the screen for a second. Arizona tribe protests lack of charges for border agents who killed Raymond Mattia. Okay, what was the circumstances? Raymond Mattia was killed when the agents responded to a call for help by tribal police of the Tohono O'odham Nation after they received reports of shots fired near the U.S.-Mexico border. 3 agents of the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol fired at the 58-year-old outside a residence and later claimed they believe he had thrown something at an officer and was brandishing a gun. Body cam footage released in June showed Mattia had no firearm. The Pima County medical examiner determined he received 9 gunshot wounds, while an accompanying toxicology report showed that Mattia had a high blood alcohol level and drugs in his system, including amphetamine and oxycodone. On Friday, the tribe's chair, Verlin Jose, and vice chair, Carla Johnson, released a statement saying they might request a congressional inquiry into the decision by Arizona State Attorney's Office not to bring charges. Okay, there are countless questions left unanswered by this decision. As a result, we cannot and will not accept the U.S. Attorney's decision. Travesty of justice. Okay, so the police officers shot a man outside his home. Okay. What does that have to do with the border? Okay. One of those things where I'm like, why is this here? Without context, I don't know why you added this. Quote, people are coming just for the quote unquote American dream, and it's becoming a nightmare, she said, for everyone. You're right. You're right. But that story is more complicated than this article. Anyway, okay. Effectively, argumentative non sequitur. If I had the bingo card out. In a region where people have long felt ignored by both political parties, residents were divided over Biden's recent executive order, which shuts down the border to nearly all asylum seekers once the average for daily unauthorized crossings hits 2,500. There should be no minimum of unauthorized crossings before you start enforcing immigration. That is so stupid. That makes no sense. Unauthorized crossing that you know about. I mean, so yeah, 2,500 plus, however many are just let through. Anyway, when Biden announced the order earlier this month, Kat Rodriguez, the activist in Tucson, there's only one, had just completed an annual 75-mile trek from Sansebe, Mexico, through the desert to Tucson to honor migrants who died making the long journey north. Well, that sounds like a great use of your time towards your end. Wow, you made a 70-mile trek to honor people who died. Maybe we should disincentivize them from making that trek in the first place rather than memorial. Okay, anyway. Quote, every election, historically and consistently, the border becomes this poker chip that politicians throw in there to show that they're tough, she said. Unless you're Donald Trump, where he actually actively tried to do something about it. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Of all the complaints about Donald Trump, if you're going to say that he used the border as a political poker chip that was just there for a moment and gone again, he consistently did his best within the boundaries that were allowed him to do something about the border, and he was opposed at every turn by the Democrats. So, in this case, then, maybe you should be a Trump supporter? I don't know. Is she? I can't tell. Quote, and it seems like there's this race to the bottom with some of these policies of who can be more draconian. Well, I'll tell you what. Come up with a better idea. What is your idea for mitigating the problem at the border? Because I'll tell you what, at this stage of the game, I'm not sure that draconian is the wrong move given the crisis. He and other advocates worried that the restrictions would further push desperate people to try to cross covertly rather than wait to apply for asylum. Well, okay, you know what? You can't, okay, a locked door only keeps out an honest man. All right, if you put up all the border walls that you want, you're still going to have people trying to climb over them and falling down on the other side and breaking their backs because desperate people are going to do desperate things. All you can do is try to mitigate and discourage the things that would draw them here in the first place to take those risks. This is why we need to get rid of sanctuary cities and sanctuary policies and anything that basically says as long as you cross that line, you're going to get a free meal. And that's part of the problem with the Presbyterian minister and congregation earlier in the article, is that for all their good intentions, they are giving people incentives to take the risk with their lives and the lives of their children. A level of pragmatism has to wash across the southern border in particular and this country in general if we're going to even approach reducing the issue. And still, bad actors are going to act badly, but there are ways to reduce the issue. We just have to be willing to take those actions. And sometimes they're going to seem mean and they're going to seem heartless, but tough love is still love. She and other advocates worry that the restrictions would further push desperate people to try to cross covertly rather than wait to apply for an asylum. Quote, people are already waiting for unreasonable amounts of time, she said, and this just puts even more people in a vulnerable position. Why are they waiting unreasonable amounts of time? Because the system is overloaded. Again, we have to start drawing lines and enforcing them strictly. There's no other way around it. There really isn't. Some immigrant advocates and local leaders have also pointed out the order doesn't come with additional funding or resources for enforcement or for cities struggling to provide for the influx of people. What city's struggling for the influx of people? Douglas is doing fine. Douglas doesn't have a problem. They took on 50% extra of their own population and they're doing fine. Nobody even notices. What are you talking about? And it's unclear that the order would deter economic migrants crossing unlawfully, many of whom understand that they do not qualify for asylum and therefore make treacherous journeys across the desert to evade authorities. Again, a locked door only keeps out an honest man. But what if, I know it's a crazy idea, what if you actually made the penalties for employing illegal immigrants so strenuous that fewer and fewer organizations and companies would be willing to take the risk of employing illegal immigrants? What if you took away the incentives for people to make those choices? I know it's a crazy idea. What if an employer took on illegal immigrants, was risking federal jail time if caught? What if we did that? There are ways to try and fix this. We're not taking those actions when we should be. Others were more optimistic. Quote, "It makes me think Biden is looking out for the country," said Rob Victor, a retired Border Patrol agent who has since settled in Douglas and is living in a dream world. Biden is not looking out for the country. He's looking out for his own political life. That's it. Only now, at the 11th hour ahead of the election, does he suddenly decide to take some extreme action on the border, where the 3-some-odd years previous, he was just basically opening the doors. You're not seeing the forest for the trees here, Rob Victor. "Agents have been overwhelmed in recent years," he said, as have cities not just along the border and across the country who lack the resources to shelter asylum seekers waiting in the U.S. for their cases to be worked out in immigration courts. Yes, so now all of a sudden Biden is looking out for the country? Okay. That order, along with Biden's executive action, shielded the undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens from deportation, are steps in the right direction to allow the immigration judges and Border Patrol agents to focus on existing applications and border security, he said. 2.4 million apprehensions fiscal year 2023. Rob Victor. Okay, it is a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Come on. But on their own, the actions aren't enough to address pressure at the border, he continued. Oh, okay. Quote, "The answers are not at the border enforcement level or at the Border Patrol level. We need comprehensive immigration reform," unquote, he said. Well, we need a lot of things. We need a lot of things. But the biggest things we can do are to look at what are the things drawing people to risk their lives to cross the border illegally. What are the incentives? Setting aside like intentional bad actors, right? Like criminals from another country or known or suspected terrorists. What is drawing desperate people here? It's money, it's resources, it's a free ride. All right, let's identify where those things are being provided at and eliminate them. Sanctuary cities, the employers who are taking on illegal immigrants, etc. Let's start there. Right? If you take away the things that are attracting people who are desperate to make desperate choices, you will disincentivize those choices. And you have to make it loud and clear across the world that you're doing this and that it will be enforced and it's not going to go away. Until then, the problem will not abate. He'd like to see the U.S. hire hundreds more immigration judges. Yeah, treat the symptom, not the disease, sure, so that those seeking asylum don't have to wait for years for a court date without the ability to earn money for themselves. And there should be more opportunities for temporary work visas for people who come to the U.S. primarily looking for work, he said. Yeah, again, just incentivize desperate people making desperate decisions. You are on the wrong side of the equation. That is rewarding bad behavior and incentivizing people to put their lives on the line. Stop it. We have to stop it, not encourage it. Quote, "That has to be negotiated between the Republicans and Democrats," he said. No kidding. Let's get the squad involved in this. Oh, we got a true believer here. Oh, man, the squad. I haven't heard about the squad mentioned in any serious terms in years now. Let's get the squad involved in this. And let's get some conservative Republicans too. And Kristen Sinema, she's a Democrat, but moderate. He said, Rob Victor, God bless you, Rob Victor. You're living in an absolute dream world. You are the perfect Democratic voter. You really are. And Kristen Sinema, she's a Democrat, but moderate, he said, referring to the Arizona senator who visited Douglas earlier this year to deliver the bad news that congressional action on immigration was unlikely in 2024 after Trump helped sink the effort in February. Yeah, because Biden had absolutely no power to do anything. It was all Trump, effectively a citizen. Okay. But anyway, Congress has repeatedly failed to reform the immigration system for decades, you don't say, and people on both sides of the border have grown weary. Quote, for me, it's been 3 years, says Maria Luisa Garcia, 55, who waits on the Mexican side of the border in Nogales, Sonora, each week to meet with her niece on the U.S. side in Nogales, Arizona. Garcia cannot cross to the U.S. until her visa application is processed, and her niece, who is also applying for residency, cannot cross south while her application is pending. The two link fingers to the gaps in the rust-red steel bollards. Quote, one more year and return, they told me. One more, she said, shaking her head. Well, I'm glad you're following the rules. You know whose fault it is that it's taking so long for you to get your applications approved? All the people who are breaking them. So, there's that story. Josh Hammond, the Suicide Squad? Well, I mean, politically speaking, yes, more or less. Advocast Diablo Scribelight, am I the only one who gets nervous when I see a photo of a bunch of Democrats carrying crosses? Ooh. That's historical reference. That's a historical reference. Let's see. Rob Victor is certifiable. He's just a very optimistic individual. No, the Squirtle Squad. And probably more effective than the actual squad. Probably would be. All right, what is up next? I got a couple more here, I think. Let's see. We did the Arizona-Mexico border. What do we have next? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about official action. Let's see. Texas takes down border razor wire. Because this was a big point of contention not too long ago where Texas was putting up razor wire all over the place, and then the government was coming in to take it down. And it was all a challenge over Texas sovereignty over their own security versus federal authority over the border. Let's see how this went. El Paso, Texas. The Texas military has taken down razor wire meant to discourage illegal immigration from Mexico along a stretch of the Rio Grande from downtown El Paso to Old Fort Bliss. Border report cameras on both sides captured the striking sight of several large piles of worn barbed wire on that mile-long stretch of the river overlooking Juarez, Mexico. That visual evidence underscores the removal of the razor wire. It was not immediately clear why the barrier came down. There was no immediate answer to emailed questions from Border Report to the Texas Military Department, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and the Department of Public Safety, asking if this represents a change of strategy, is maintenance related, or perhaps a harbinger of things to come. It is interesting. This was a big fight not too long ago. Texas Governor Greg Abbott tweeted photos of a welder working on a fence-like structure 2 days ago. Quote, Texas National Guard soldiers construct barriers that will be placed along the border in El Paso. Texas continues to use all possible strategies to deter and repel illegal entry into our state, unquote, Abbott said on X on July 2nd. Oh, Texas is going for an upgrade. Oh, man. So, yeah, I remember looking at these stories a couple of digests back where you had people who tried to cross the Rio Grande and drowned. And then the Democrats tried to say that it was because of the razor wire that they died. And then that became a whole thing because federal law says that it is the federal government's sovereign jurisdiction over the border. And yet Texas taking moves to try to discourage illegal immigration with, they had that buoy line across the Rio Grande at one point, and then, of course, the concertina wire. Does the state of Texas retain its own authority to protect its border on top of or before the federal government makes a move? Because the federal government's not doing anything to protect the border, and Texas is concerned for its sovereignty and its security. Does Texas not have the right to secure its own border? even if the federal government doesn't do anything. That's been the fight. But apparently, yeah, take down the barbed wire. We're going to go for metal fencing. Uh-oh. In any event, the state's efforts to guard the border were still evident on Friday. DPS vehicles and unmarked pickup trucks could be seen going up and down the stretch of the border without razor wire that, before the barrier going up last year, was a favorite give-up spot for migrants trying to surrender to U.S. Border Patrol and claim political asylum. The barrier erected last year immediately reduced border crossings in the area and displaced people to walk several miles in search of a place they could ford the river. Abbott said he ordered it in place without effective Biden administration enforcement. Later, he claimed the state's efforts to curtail illegal immigration had displaced people to cross through other states. Well, and then those other states will have to deal with it on their own, I guess. Migrant encounters have been trending down all along the border for the past few months, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. They had plummeted since early June when the Biden administration threatened to cross the border. Threatened to cross the border? You mean close the border? Okay, I'll read it as it is written. They had plummeted since early June when the Biden administration threatened to cross the border to asylum seekers coming between ports of entry if a 2,500 threshold was reached in any given week. There shouldn't be a 2,500 threshold at all. It should just be closed. If you try to get into the country illegally, you don't get to claim asylum. Full stop. I don't understand this 2,500 threshold thing. That makes it a race. That means, I think I said this the last time, every week that means there is a race to be one of those first 2,500. Border Report camera crews recorded a single migrant going across the Rio Grande from Juarez to El Paso since the razor wire came down. Juan Carlos Lopez Morales, a spokesman for the Catholic Diocese of Juarez, said he hopes the Texas barrier comes down for good. But he also admitted that if it stays down, it could encourage migrants to use that path into the United States again. Well, okay, if you can understand the risks of both sides, why do you want it to stay down? Why would you want it to stay down? People are drowning themselves on a regular basis, as well as innocent children trying to cross the Rio Grande to enter the country illegally. If we can discourage that behavior, if we can mitigate those risks, why wouldn't you want that to happen? Make up your mind. Quote, it shouldn't have to be there. Shouldn't? Okay, it's inhuman treatment towards migrants, Lopez said. No, it's trying to preserve human life, you moron. Jeez, what is wrong with people? Quote, now to take it away, it should have been done from the start because it was not appropriate to treat migrants that way. Putting a razor wire fence on your side of the line is not an inhuman act on someone else. It puts the choice to the person making the decision to take the risk. It is meant to discourage bad behavior. An inhuman act. Inhuman act. Does the church have walls? Does it have a seating capacity? Are those acts inhuman? It should have been done from the start because it was not appropriate to treat migrants that way. Some also will see it as an easy way to cross. Okay, even he can't quite keep these two ideas in his mind at the same time. They keep competing with each other. It's like, well, it's a terrible thing to do, but I mean, it would stop people from trying to cross. That will motivate more migrants to move towards that section of the U.S. border. Yeah, so what if we just secured the border writ large? What if we disincentivize people from crossing in the Rio Grande? Just as an example. It's just one of the most deadly examples close to our border. Trying to cross the Rio Grande and rushing water. How many people have drowned? How many children have drowned in trying to cross that river? Okay, if we could discourage people from doing that, if we could tell people before they even tried to make the attempt that doing so would not lead them to the ends that they want, do you think that could save lives in the long term? If we actually had to discourage people from trying to come here in the first place and fix their own countries for a better life, do you think that could be beneficial for the long term? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. Lopez underscored the complexity of the issue. Well, yeah, of course, because he's having a total schizophrenic meltdown trying to think about what he wants versus what the results will be. You're not kidding. Lopez underscored the complexity of the issue, stating that the movement of people across the U.S.-Mexico border cannot be resolved by simply, quote, putting up or taking down barriers, unquote. You're right. It can't be solved. Again, locked door, honest man. But it can be reduced and the risks mitigated. He stressed the need for comprehensive, clear, and humane guidelines in both Mexico and the United States to regulate this movement. That too. Also, good fences make good neighbors. I don't know if that's actually a religious saying, but it feels like it. With the people in Douglas from the previous article and now Mr. Lopez in this article, you can hear, right, these conflicting cognitive dissonances taking place. It's like, well, I mean, it might be desperate people, but we're good people and we're humane. And you may be completely humane. I don't doubt you're a humane person. I don't doubt your sincerity. I don't doubt the conflict in you versus trying to help desperate people, but looking at the bigger picture. But unfortunately, you're going to have to look at the bigger picture. You're going to have to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is beyond your personal, anecdotal, humanitarian efforts and wants and needs. Okay, there's a bigger problem going on. But Texas is apparently going for an upgrade. They're taking down the razor wire and, at least, allegedly, from the article's implication, going to start putting up even more effective barriers in the long term, which, of course, will lead to further conflicts with the Biden administration. But, of course, the Biden administration is going to have a hard time fighting Texas on this right now after Biden's executive order. You know, you can't suddenly get tough on the border and then start complaining about people trying to secure the border. That's going to be rough. That'd be a difficult sell at this point in time. But speaking of Biden's recent decisions on the border, let's go to our last article for today. But before I get there, go over here. Full Metal Joker says, fill the river border with gators. Sure, let's get a big, let's actually, you know what? Let's dig out the Rio Grande even wider than it currently is and put like a drawbridge and battlements. You know, that'd be cool. All along the border, Fortress America. That'd be cool. I mean, it would be cool. I don't think it'd be practical, but it would be cool. Let's see. Let's see. Mumport 40. This seems like it makes no sense until you realize that the U.S. government doesn't see Mexico as a separate country. It's a tributary state of the empire. Not with the cartels running it. Lopez Obrador, previous president. Well, he'll be the previous president soon enough. And his replacement is basically just a clone. He was so beholden to the cartels. Mexico is only half a country of what it really was. A sovereign country. It's not really a sovereign country anymore. It's more made up of like, you know, competing territories that just happen to be within the same overall border between bodies of water. Yeah, it's mostly cartel, or a lot large swaths of it are either explicitly cartel controlled, and just about everything else has its cartel fingers in it. So sometimes I wonder if Mexico even is a country anymore. It's just a Potemkin village on a large scale. But anyway, yeah, let's look at Biden's executive order and see what some of the local news has to say about it. A look at the border 1 month since asylum executive order was signed. Apprehensions have dropped at the border, but issues in the Tucson sector still remain. Now, this might be repetitive to some previous reporting, but let's take a look. In June, sweeping changes were brought to the U.S. border policy. President Biden's order limiting asylum to those who cross unlawfully has led to a drop in apprehensions across the southern border. In the Tucson sector, apprehensions have dropped by over 60%. Again, apprehensions. You can't necessarily know how many have crossed, especially if they've gotten away with it. The biggest visible change at the border since the order was signed is an increased number of deportation buses dropping off migrants at the Nogales port of entry. The migrants are walked to Mexico by Border Patrol agents and CBP officers. Those deported have included many families and children. Well, if you're going to make exceptions, you're not really, solving the problem. Some we spoke to say they had not been given a chance to make their case for asylum, which is supposed to be granted under current laws. That's why the laws need to change to disallow it to people who cross illegally. That should be, I swear, that should be such an easy thing to pass. Either you approach a port of entry and apply for asylum under policy and law, or you don't. And if you don't get to claim asylum. It should be long term. Short of again, I think I said this in a previous stream. Short of an instance where you are witnessed being chased to the border by gun-wielding gang members, and it is truly an emergency, any crossing into the country illegally should disqualify you from asylum claims. You go back and you apply per the rules. Quote, we asked for the asylum permit, but we were told we were denied. No interview, nothing, a migrant mother, Karina, said. Well, you crossed illegally, I'm guessing. Volunteers were handing out supplies to the deportees, saying the new policy is hurting people with real asylum claims. Then apply through a real process. Don't cross illegally. How much more simple can this be? Quote, it's heartbreaking to know 400 to 600 people is being sent back. Once the quota is met, 2,500 a day, everyone else is just gone, Carolina Pena said. Again, that 2,500 thing is ridiculous. That just makes it a race. Be the first of the 2,500 for a day or the week or whatever it was. Why is that there? That is not helping anything. But the Biden administration is already touting the success of the order. Yeah, for temporary drops in numbers because of shock and awe. And as soon as the smugglers and everybody else finds ways around it or loopholes or new pathways, it's just going to jump up again. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, one of the most failed federal officials in modern history, visited Tucson 3 weeks after it was signed, pushing back against those critical of the order, saying fear alone isn't enough to get asylum. Oh my gosh, well, good. That's good. Yes, that is under law. You can't just be fearful of something. You have to have proof of it. Quote, the fear that must be proven is fear of persecution due to one's membership of a social group. It is not fear of generalized violence, unquote, Mayorkas said. Well, thank goodness. Now, enforce that in totality, not leaving open 2,500 a day. Even as apprehensions have dropped significantly, local numbers still show an average of around 500 people crossing a day that you know of. The sector leads also the entire border this year in total apprehensions with over 400,000, both historically high. Yeah, this is a temporary situation. It's going to be challenged in the courts and so on. You need to change the law to disregard anyone claiming asylum who is caught in the country illegally. Complaining that, we were sent back and we weren't even given a chance. Well, you didn't follow the law. You want to enter into a country of laws, you have to follow the law. But it's going to take a long time. Oh, well, gosh, whose fault is that? People like you breaking the rules. It's just... Anyway, prognostications. Whatever action is taken for the border by the Biden administration now or into the future will be performative at best. Immigration policy will still be gridlocked in the Congress because the Democrats don't want to do it and the Republicans want to do it themselves. And they don't want to give credit for any advantages made or any progress made, I should say, on the border to a Democratic leader. So the only way that anything is going to get done at the border is if Trump is elected, and at least for a period of time significant enough that it'll make a difference, both the House and the Senate under Republican control. The likelihood that this is going to be the situation now or in the near future, all things considered, seems pretty slim. But, it is the Democrat situation to lose at this point. Because if they keep propping up Biden, If they don't, in fact, the tribalism that's starting up in the Democratic Party over what to do about Biden, who will succeed him if he does not get the nomination, etc., it's not doing the Democrats any favors. At the same time, I'm not sure that the electorate isn't going to put safeguards on a Trump presidency with having more people in the Senate and the House to, stymie him or balance it out. Because Trump isn't, I'll tell you what, Trump's performance at the debate wasn't anything to write home about. He was all over the place. He was making stuff up. He was all just gobbledygook. But of course, the news story about the debate wasn't Trump, because Trump was just, being Trump. It was Biden suddenly being Biden unfiltered, which was the story. But yeah, at this point, it would take a miracle. See, here's the thing. Every day that Biden doesn't get out of the race is a day taken away from a potential Democratic candidate who might be able to effectively challenge Trump. Not necessarily win, but effectively challenge. Because the closer that we get to the Democratic convention, where it's all going to come down to the wire one way or the other, the less time any other candidate or candidates have to make their case either to the party or to the American public in opposition to Trump. So, with Biden not deciding to drop out of the race, every day he is stealing an opportunity from the Democrats to gain a chance at not just the White House, right, but further seats, both locally and federally, because confidence in the Democratic Party itself is on the line the longer that Biden goes on not dropping out, and the longer that the Democrats take to try to come to a decision, because they look ridiculous. And this entire situation it could have been foreseen so long ago. You put up a compromised candidate simply on the basis that he used to be vice president, and that admittedly everybody else in the field in 2020 was an absolute loser, including the person he selected to be his vice president. So you put up people who are weak, both mentally and politically, into the highest office in the land. This entire situation is the fault of the Democrats. I just saw the other day, and I'm seeing this elsewhere, where people on the Democratic side are so ticked off at the current situation, they're like, I don't care who is the candidate as long as they can beat Trump. And I put up, I know it's cheesy. I put up a GIF on this one where I said, that was the thinking back in 2020. So, and then I put up the GIF of the line from the movie No Country for Old Men, where Anton Chigurh, the villain of the piece, he says, if your rule brought you to this, what was the use of the rule? This is the same thinking that led us to this crisis as it is. And nobody seems to be able to see beyond their own political leanings. Again, forest for the trees. The security of this country depends on people at the top being able to perform competently. Okay, when the sun sets on the East Coast, Joe Biden's ability to perform competently decreases exponentially. That's the word I was looking for. I was going to say extraordinarily, but that works too. Exponentially, extraordinarily. And he's supposed to be the guy making the decisions. You always hear about that. What happens with that 3 a.m. call? Who do you want on the line at that 3 a.m. call? Not Joe Biden. He probably doesn't even think the phone's ringing. We need people in office who are actually competent and know what they're doing, not blowhards and not mindless zombies. But those are our options this year, just like they were back in 2020. Everything old is new again. And what's the definition of insanity? Anyway, that's my show for Sunday. Not very good news at the border. And what good news they tried to spin isn't really good news, because Biden is just trying to reach back to where things were before he took office. Reductions in apprehensions by taking actions that exemplify your predecessor's policies shouldn't be a feather in your cap. But that's what they keep trying to do with this. Oh, look, Biden did this thing and stuff dropped. Oh, you mean he was Trumpian in his border policy and things changed? Why did we vote for him again in regards to the vote in regards to the border? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to call it here because obviously my articulation is failing me as well as my voice. If you have thoughts on this, I'd appreciate you put comments in the comments below because that's what comments are for. Also, if you'd like to join the Discord server, I just happen to have a link to the Discord server here into the chat right now. If you'd like to join the Discord server, click on that. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me you're not a bot. Actually watch the stream and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is Douglas. The town featured in one of those articles there. Just say, hello, Douglas, and I'll know that you watched the show. As well, you can find me here Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I look at off-brand TED Talks for information and entertainment. And also, still trying to clamp down all the scheduled appearances and everything. But as of right now, at least partially unofficially, Friday, July 26th, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern will be the next installment of Living on Borrowed Crime, a panel discussion about the motivations and critiques against true crime as a genre, featuring, currently scheduled to appear, Matt Orchard, Dave's Lemonade, Misery Machine, Mr. Black Pasta, and True Red Crime. That may change either with additional people or maybe some subtractions depending on time zones, because we're talking international here. We got, Canada, East Coast, Australia, Latvia. It's all over the place. But that's the current plan. Elsewise, everyone, thank you for joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning. Leave a like on the way out if you would, if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm told that subscriptions sometimes get taken away by YouTube, unbeknownst to people who actually subscribed previously. So check your subscriptions and make sure everything's subscribed and that little bell is hit. I'm doing my best to be like a real YouTuber now. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the GoFundMes and other fundraisers pinned to the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Very much appreciated. Everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday. Try to stay cool if you're in a place where it's hot. Try to stay warm in a place if it's cold. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.